So I think we'll start formally, and we have okay. So we have almost crossed more than 50 attendees. So we'll start formally now. So welcome everyone. Good morning. I am Dr. Swadeep Srivastav, representing Heal Health Group, and welcome to our webinar on demystifying NMC guidelines conundrum. Why we say conundrum? Because there was definitely a lot of confusion and discussions going around. This topic became very hot in the last few weeks. And we have with us the pharma policy, legal, and medical experts to address your concerns in this webinar, which will go for more than over an hour. And we have the sessions lined up. We'll show you through the intro video what all sessions we have and who are the speakers, panelists today. So I would request my team to play the intro video first. For those who have joined a little late, we formally start with our webinar on and discussion on demystifying NMC guidelines conundrum. We have our panelists, experts on board. They are ready to start the discussion. Just to give a brief background, while we started planning about this, building a discussion platform about this around this very timely topic for the overall healthcare industry and the ecosystem of important stakeholders, mainly the doctors, SCPs, as well as the in the industry concerned industries. This new NMC guideline was notified by the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare a couple of weeks back, keeping in mind the interest of the patients and the society at large. But a huge hue and cry started happening, mainly on the issues of making generics prescription mandatory for the practicing doctors and SCPs. When just 2-3 days back, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare called for a stakeholder consultation meet, and day before yesterday, the said NMC guidelines were put in abeyance for the time being. So we are discussing. We have the experts, and we wanted to take certain pertinent issues. Of course, the core of everything will be the demystifying these NMC guidelines, and of course, understanding what this confusion, hue and cry, opposition was. There was a lot of support also for this guideline. Government was also praised for being very upfront in coming up with stricter guidelines on medical ethics and other issues related to patients' interest. But while this has been put on abeyance, of course, many more questions come up. That's why we thought we will still continue with this discussion and this webinar. Like, what will be the new version when it will be notified? When will it undergo redrafting and public circulation, or directly be notified? Will the all generic prescription clause be dropped in response to the stakeholders' strong opposition? How can we redefine the ethics and the thin lines separating pharma sponsorship for the medical community, especially in the context of conferences? That's very, very important point. What alternative exists for pharma sponsorship of medical conferences, given the perceived inseparability between the pharma and the doctors community? Thus, how should the line of ethics be redefined? So these always have been very important, pertinent questions, and we all have been searching for the right answers and the right ways of doing certain things, mainly keeping patients' interest in mind. But because of these guidelines, these came on the surface again, and that's why this discussion. Before I introduce the speakers one by one and hand it over to them for their point of view, I would request Mr. Atul Sharma to set the stage for today's discussion. Can you unmute?
Hi, morning, everybody, and welcome to the eminent people sitting as a panelist, people coordinating, and experts. And we also welcome people sitting behind as a participant. Now, when we talk about the code of conducts or regulation, I think it is utmost important because it's about human health, patient centricity, patient safety, and in a background when we are speaking loud that we are a fifth largest economy and that we are going to be the third largest economy soon. So with those kind of aspirations, the code of conducts, regulatory environment around patient care or patient health need to be more and more stringent. However, at a time like when we talk about or the government or regulatory agencies, they look regulation sometime, whether the patient centricity versus access. And that's where the whole lot of the confusion starts. So patient safety means the quality drugs. So there is a big question about what is the quality of drug when we talk about, I think the people or a patient pool in the country or worldwide are less informed. What does it mean by quality? Whether the drugs are coming, say, from US FDA approved facilities or coming from a WHO GMP certified facilities or GMP certified facilities, and some place when we have mushrooming of pharma companies providing generic medicine, we even don't know whether even the basic GMP exists or does not exist. Say the organizations which provide quality control checks and certificates are minimal. However, the manufacturers are enormous. And the number of product batch by batch, where the real time, the quality checks are happening from a GMP or less than GMP certified manufacturing facility. So under patient safety, it is wonderful that patient should have access, but affordability and then transferring that authority of dispensing whatever the quality of pharmacist feel is appropriate and doctors are pressed to prescribe generic. I think it creates a whole lot of confusion. We have the experts and we would like to take their inputs. The second is the pharmaceutical organization from patient and regulators perspectives are viewed as the commercial organization. They are not viewed as somebody who is constantly innovating and has, if it takes a last 100 years, the evidence-based medicine or access to quality care or innovation to treat the difficult to treat diseases or common diseases, it has been the contribution from pharmaceutical companies and they take the innovation to the doctors, and that relationship has been historically been evident. And the engagement when we see is viewed as a nexus, which is completely not acceptable, I feel. But we would like to have the experts view that it is not a nexus, but it is a value creation by innovators. And in real-time practice, the physicians, they use that innovation very appropriately and they make very say informed decisions. So medical practice is not about what you feel and what you don't feel, but I think they spend day in, day out and then constantly learn, that they're constantly updated on the upcoming evidences, and then they deploy most appropriate treatments. So with this, like, I'll go back to Swadeep and say, can we start with the first panelist, and you want to have the views?
Thank you, Atulji. And of course, one of the key most important stakeholder around this whole discussion will always be and have always been the medical community, the doctors, or whatever we call them, the healthcare practitioners, the medical practitioners, and the representing organization, Indian Medical Association, has been at the forefront on coming forward, expressing their views, and very actively got involved into giving their recommendations and suggestions and modifications for the guidelines, and keeping in mind the interest of the patients as well as, of course, the interest of their community, the medical community. And they have been also applauded for their very proactive stance and the proactive positioning which they have took, the Indian Medical Association as a body. So we have with us Dr. J.A. Jayalal. Dr. Jayalal is, I'll just give half a minute introduction. He's a secretary, also the Secretary General of Commonwealth Medical Association. He's also the former National President of Indian Medical Association. He's the he's a professor of surgery in Tirunelveli Medical College. He has also been the district governor, YS Men International Organization. And Dr. Jayalal was also the national head of IMA, UNESCO, Bioethics, and Haifa. So over to you, Dr. Jayalal. Your perspective is very important. So let's start with that first.
Thank you very much at this crucial juncture. And I must say that it is once again proved when all of us come together and raise our voice in unison, even the people who pretend that they are not hearing, they will be tend to hear that and implement that. So this is the one occasion where the entire medical fraternity and the pharmaceuticals and even the public people were able to raise their voice against dreaded and draconian act which has been proposed by the NMC and the government of India. We always believe whenever we are implementing certain laws, whenever we are implementing certain new provisions, and when we tend to think in long term, what are the consequences it is going to have? Is it beneficial to the public? Is it beneficial to the population or the fraternity in together? I think this NMC would not have brought in such a guidelines in such a haste. They would have never made. Again, I must say before I talk on this issue, we are living in a country where whatever law you are prescribing, it is only for modern medical person. It is not applicable to any other healthcare professional. An Ayushman can write any secret medicine. Ayushman can call it as in by any name. An Ayush person can never need to say that what is the ingredient of it. But when a modern medicine man is practicing the drug, that he has to only take the generic medicine. That is a philosophy now the government of India is following, and this is also a result of this. Why Indian Medical Association or the doctors in large is opposing this act? It's a very simple fact. For various reasons. First, that generic drugs are not available in the nook and corner of our country. If I want to write some drugs for the tuberculosis, can the government of India says that every part of the country you have a generic tuberculosis drug? If I want to write drugs which is now modernly coming into the market, which is beneficial for treating the hypertension, beneficial for treating the patient who is in a septic condition, and the government of India can assure that this drug is available in the market or available in the store. So what they want, if the doctor cannot write that drug, and so that the patient will not get the benefit, so ultimately the death of the patient is going to happen. So this law is not only for we are not worried on the sake of the medical fraternity, but on the sake of the poor population and where the people is going to get. That's the first thing which we are worried, concerned, and worried. That is why we aggressively campaigned against this. The second component, it is a right and privilege for a doctor when he studies and does a graduation course or the post-graduation to decide and which is good for his patient. When the patient coming to him for some treatment, it is a responsibility of the doctor to decide that my treatment, is it going to help him or not? But what is happening here, unfortunately, the doctor has to write the generic drug and he goes to the pharmacy. The pharmacy will decide that what brand he has to give. It's sort of pathetic situation. And we are living in a country A qualified doctor is coming and prescribing a drug with a brand, but the pharmacy is seeing there will be in the position to give the which brand of the drug is necessary, because he has no moral responsibility whether this drug is going to help this patient or not. The patient is not going to come back to the pharmacy store and say that this drug is not working, but he is going to come back only to the doctor. So ultimately, it is not the prescription, but it's reaching the patient, compliance of the patient, the effect of the patient. All responsibilities lies with the doctor. So it cannot be given to someone else to decide the which brand of the drug to wear. Third, why the IMA has opposed is quality of the drug. We are talking in the terms of the two important words which in the medical profession we talk: quality and patient safety. Quality is the hallmark of modern medical profession, and every step and every way we are ensuring that. When we are talking about quality, it includes the quality of the drug also. What is the guarantee today we available today in India? How much of the quality check is able to do in the medical drug? Hardly the investigation shows not less than only less than 2% of our drugs produced in the market is undergoing a quality check. We have seen this even during the COVID. How voluminous, spurious drugs has come to the pharmacy. We do not have a mechanism. We have in a district, one district pharmaceutical, district drug controller, and we will not be able to do the pharmacy control. So until the government ensure all the generic drugs will undergo quality check, and Indian Medical Association stand firm that we will not be subjudicated to write these pharmaceutical drugs in the name of generic drugs. Let the government comes out and say that the quality of the drug is being ensured. And once it is the quality of the drug is being ensured, then definitely it will be possible. Finally, I will say why we oppose that. And this is something we need to say when we have a straight route to achieve a goal. When you go around, roaming around and coming to the goal, is always an upset. The government of India should have thought they could have achieved the intention of providing the free drug to the patient by two means: either curtailing all the pharma industries producing a branded drugs and they are not allowing any branded drug to be sold, or they do the price fixing for all the drugs. One drug, one country, one drug, one price. Whether it is a Rosilin, whether it is a company coming from the Glasgow, company coming from the Sun Pharma, all the drugs will have a common drug. Whether the government of India can do that, and if it can do, there is a fixing of the price as a common and banning the drugs and the brand, only making sure that it's been only the generic drugs are being done. Definitely, Indian Medical Association will be happy, because our intention, our people should get affordable, accessible healthcare, but the quality and patient safety cannot be compromised. So we are really upset with the right word you have chosen, conundrum. The NMC itself is the conundrum. The composition, the acts which are there. This is not the first time. At least in the last 1 year, 6 notifications of the NMCs were returned back, because they put all that without thinking, without action planning. What's the reason? Because there is no democratically elected public population. Doctors are there in the NMC. NMC is a nominated people. And their NMC is a dictator people which has been put by the government. Unless we have a democratic body, elected body representing each state, where they will be able to openly say their voice, say something against that, then only a collective decision will be done, which will be good for that. If it is not there, as long as the NMC is going to be a nominated body, such things are going to happen. They will come out with act like this, and by the pressure of the government and by the pressure of the public, they have to withdraw. This is the 6th time in this year NMC notifications are withdrawn. This is a shame on our country. This is the greatest conundrum which is happening. So I once again support all you for your extremely cooperation and united face, and for the fight against this, and ensuring today not the medical fraternity is saved, but the public and the community is saved from this draconian act which has been pronounced by the NMC.
Thank you, Dr. Jailal. Though you are very upfront and very bold and sometimes harsh too, particularly on NMC, but we can understand that, sir. NMC itself is a conundrum, is probably a statement taken from here. But that's fine, sir. We have other speakers, other panelists also to give their perspective. Today we are live. We have almost crossed 60 attendees on a Zoom link, but more importantly, we are touching almost 500 attendees live on our YouTube now. So it is going more wider on YouTube. We also have a lot of media friends joining across from the country, and that is, and let's make it more interesting and going forward. And now, of course, after your very bold opinions on NMC, it's very important to understand the current NMC guideline, because, sir, yes, we have been into thick and thin of it. The IMA, the doctor, the senior doctors, the policymakers, the pharma CEOs. We have been thick and thin, but the lot of people. That's why the whole purpose of setting this was that still the new guidelines and its implication itself is a conundrum, because people have not been able to understand and interpret it, mainly at the mid level, mainly at the doctors in the periphery, mainly at the medical community who are like not directly exposed to the policymakers and the legal experts. So we have with us a very prominent legal expert with us, Miss Krishna Sharma. I met her a few days back, and I convinced ma'am to come and give a detailed presentation on the NMC guidelines to make our understanding much better. I will just give a very brief introduction about Ms. Krishna Sharma. Though in the pharma industry and also in the medical community, a lot of people know her. She is a lawyer of 25 years of experience. She is founder and managing partner of Corporate Law Group, a New Delhi-based renowned law firm. She was the additional advocate general for the state of Assam in Supreme Court of India, New Delhi, from 2001 to 2016. She's an acclaimed policy aficionado. She works primarily in law, regulations, and policy in life sciences, high technology, shipping, and other regulated sectors. So over to you, Krishna ji.
Thank you, Swadeep, for that introduction. I have been working in this area for 25 years, but I am a lawyer of 30 years standing. So then I used to be mostly a litigating lawyer prior to 1998. So Swadeep asked me to speak a little bit about the NMC guidelines. And I thought that it's still topical, though it was kept in abeyance day before yesterday. Still is important to understand it, because it says that it may still be notified at a later date. Okay, what shape we do not know, but the shape can't be as it is. The next slide. Okay. So it is called the National Medical Commission Registered Medical Practitioner Professional Conduct Regulation 2023. It was dated August 2nd, 2023, but it was published in the e-Gazette only on August 9th, when all mayhem broke loose. And interestingly, because of the opposition of the IMA particularly and the industry, it has been now kept in abeyance with effect from August 24, 2023. And it clarifies that it shall not be operative till further notification on the subject by NMC. So it's not kind of gone. Now, both the notifications were issued by the NMC Ethics and Medical Registration Board within the NMC. And so what happens now that it's been kept in abeyance? So the status quo ante is when the Medical Council of India Guidelines 2022 held the field. This NMC guideline was, focused on the registered medical practitioners registered under the NMC Act. It doesn't apply, for example, to dentists, because that's like, a different pathway. It doesn't apply to Ayurvedic doctors. Okay. So it is only to registered medical practitioners of the modern system. Now, there are three issues that I would only flag for, further consultations. And those are number one, and you will see my bias that I did not start with the generic prescription issue, which is really what is really the hottest topic. but I'm starting with the clause 35 that talks about industry RMP or RMP industry interaction. And that is because this area is very misunderstood, this interaction. It is seen with a very jaundiced eye, as if every interaction leads to a conflict of interest and is intrinsically, not above board. And that is a mentality that needs to be changed within the, regulators and the government, because my firm and I represent a number of research-based biopharmaceutical companies and medical devices companies, for whom this interaction with doctors is absolutely sine qua non of their business. Because these companies have to interact with doctors in order to provide the information. As you are aware, because of the Drugs Magic Remedies Act, there is no advertisement is possible. The only way, and it provides for it, that the interaction with doctors has to be one-to-one. You can't go to the patient. So this is absolutely central to the research-based biopharma companies, as well as to the medical devices companies. So what does 35 really say? Okay, 35 starts with saying that RMPs and their families cannot receive gifts, travel facilities, hospital monetary grants, consultancy fee or honorariums. As you see, I highlight that, or access to entertainment, etc., from commercial health establishments, companies, corporate hospitals, under any pretext. Okay. It then goes on to say that it does not include, the salaries of RMPs who may be employed by these organizations. And then this is problematic because it says many things, 35, that RMPs, they should not engage with third-party educational activity like CPD, seminar, workshop, symposia, conference, etc., where there is direct or indirect sponsorship from pharmaceutical companies or allied health sector. So allied health sector is where the medical devices, nutrition, etc. would come in. And then it is a little bit of moral science that, they should be aware of conflict of interest situations that may arise. And the nature of this relationship should be in public domain. For example, they give clinical trials and should not be in contravention of any law, etc., etc. And RMPs himself or as part of the society, organization, association, this relationship with the pharmaceutical and allied health sector should be clear and transparent and open to scrutiny. Okay, so many of these things at the, you have to see it from the eye from which, the NMC saw it actually, rather than what it actually means. I think there is no, controversy over the fact that these relationships should be, one, transparent, second, that there should be, no conflict of interest, or there should be a mechanism under which a conflict of interest can be, ferreted out. So there's no controversy on that aspect, and that in a way is being done by another set of rules that is currently, in place. It's not mandatory, but it's voluntary with requirements of oversight by the Department of Pharmaceuticals, and it is called the UCPMP, the Uniform Code of Pharmaceutical Marketing Practices. And it has the do's and don'ts. Also, the MCI guidelines of 2002, which was, changed, amended to a certain extent in 2009, it also has very extant provisions as to what is allowed, what is not allowed. Okay, so it's not that there was nothing in place when this fairly draconian regulations were issued. Okay. One of the things that I judge regulation by as a lawyer would be what are the penalties? Okay, so guidelines for provides in 5 stages levels what the penal provisions are. So in this case, if there is a violation of 35, it is L3. It's suspension of the license for a maximum period of 3 months. Okay, so I'm flagging this because this does require, in case NMC thinks of coming up with a changed version at some point. By the way, this guideline has not changed since the draft of 2022. Okay, summer of 2022. It hasn't changed. So in case it comes up in the future, it definitely requires fairly drastic change and certainly better language. Now, the next thing that I do flag is the whole thing of continuing professional development. So it seeks to replace CME with something called CPD program. Okay. Now, the CPD program, it does require RMP to get a total of at least 30 credit hours every 5 years. And the problem is with what is, the mandate, and that mandate comes from guideline 10, which pretty much kind of says that, yes, it will be run by the government, the NMC. What will be taught will require the blessings of the NMC. Which institutions will do it will have to have the blessings of the NMC, and it kind of provides forms, etc., for it. Okay. Now, with a lot of humility, I must kind of say that this is not how a CME has to be done. Okay. And this is not, it's not like a, nursery class or school that these are registered medical practitioners. They know what, and at the professional bodies that they are part of. So it can't be so limiting that the government says what is to be the part of the curriculum, how to conduct it, which institutions should conduct it. I think it's an extremely limiting manner of looking at CMEs, and I draw your attention to it. And the final portion that I want to draw your attention is, of course, the most important, and that got the maximum attention, is about the prescribing of generic medicines, clause 8, where they say, and it's very interesting that either it is loosely just bad language, legal language that was used, or that there was some intention behind it. Because all through the regulations and the guidelines, I find that the intermixing for the same issue of words like should, shall, best effort. Okay. So it's very interesting that in guideline 3, which talks about ethics of for regular RMPs, it goes at great length to say that the guideline is not a legal necessity and that doctors have a higher responsibility. So it is not mandatory. Guideline 3. Though guideline 1, which relates to prescription of generic medicine, is, though 8, the regulation itself uses the word should, which from a legal parlance, I would treat it differently from shall. Shall is mandatory, should is best effort. So in the guidelines, however, there is a certain amount of mandatoriness because it's very prescriptive as to what is to be done with great details, including a form. So reading the clause 8 along with the guidelines, it appears that it is mandatorily required for RMPs to prescribe drugs in the INN, the generic name. Now, the penalty for violation of this provision ranges from L1 and L2. Okay, so yes, there is, unlike if you all saw what came out of the DGHS in May this year, where it was a direction to government hospitals and doctors working in the government hospitals that you will have to prescribe in generic medicines. And it kind of has a thing that, action will be taken, though it's no clarity as to what action will be taken. And the second part of it says that medical representatives cannot meet the government doctors, and only emails can be sent. Okay, so we haven't heard much about it after that came out, but here we find that the guidelines are to everybody, not just to the government doctors. Now, one issue that I do want to kind of, bring out is what I practice. And if you see the grounds that I mentioned, the second last one, that the current Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940 and the Drug Rules 1945 actually prevents, substitution. It does not allow for substitution. So this is Rule 65, Sub-Rule 11A. It says that no person can dispense a prescription substance and substitute it. That is kind of specified in Schedule H, H1, and X. Okay. So why did they have this in the rule? Because of the very fundamental principle that the RMP is better placed than somebody, a chemist, if not even a chemist, actually, as you know, how pharmacies are manned, to make that judgment. So you're moving that judgment, which is an all-important judgment for the patient, from the doctor to the chemist, which is kind of a completely unsustainable position. And Dr. Jayalal also mentioned the quality. The current requirements under the law, under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act and the rules thereunder, is absolutely inadequate to ensure uniform quality and standards across the country, and that's why you have the concept of a branded generic in India, which kind of, has a quality, a trust, a safety, efficacy attached to it. The other point that I do want to kind of bring to your attention is that, for many of our my clients, it doesn't matter, because if it's a patented drug, the INN is going to be the only one. Okay, but for branded generics and, India's place in the world, the pharmacy in the world, this is a very important segment. Even the very draconian drug price control order actually, has a place. The way ceiling prices are fixed for scheduled drugs is based on brands. So you take the average of 10 largest selling brands, and that is your, ceiling price. So when all other legislation has a concept of branded generics in India, how can the NMC just come in to kind of, dismantle that edifice? And before you dismantle that edifice, there's a lot that needs to be done. I'm not the best place to go into the ethics of it, because there are so many, doctors in this panel. I would leave that to them. I think I have kind of flagged the 3 issues that I feel has to be addressed before the NMC thinks of coming back with a new regulation sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Krishnaji. I think it was very, very insightful, and most importantly, it's being such a large issue, so much of documents on NMC guidelines, you have really tried to make it in a nutshell, and that's very important. We have captured the important points, important issues, and that really matters. And I think you were able to explain it in a lot of clarity, and of course we'll have a lot of questions around it which will be coming. So now going to the other panelists, a very important medical community representative, Dr. Sanjeev Malik. Dr. Sanjeev Malik has heard what Dr. Jayalal said, and very talking and sort of putting the perspective on the NMC and how it is a conundrum. First, let me briefly introduce Dr. Sanjeev Malik. I know him since he was at the helm of Indian Medical Association. He was able to re-Christian and bring Indian Medical Association activities at the forefront when he was the national president there. First the Secretary General, then the national president. He's also the founder, and he's seen both sides. He's also been into medical education through his through his group Medivord group, Drug Today, what he created, and and as I told you, the former president of Indian Medical Association and also of SARC Medical Association. He's a Dr. B.C. Roy Award winner by Honorable President of India. And Dr. Malik, your perspective, the medical community perspective is definitely is the medical community feels affected, as Krishna ji also pointed out in her presentation, that they are being treated as amateurs, somebody who are not responsible, somebody who may not be having, they need to be monitored, they need to be, and most importantly, they are being judged what they are not. So over to you, Dr. Malik, to have your perspective.
Well, thank you, Sudeep. I think a lot of issues have actually been covered by Professor Jayalal and the concerns which the medical profession faces. I would look at certain things with a different perspective, although the whole end result that we are all wanting is probably the same. Now, let's understand NMC, when they put out the draft for public opinion in 2022, a lot of organizations, including the IMA and a lot of its state branches, gave out recommendations to the NMC. Now, we've been principally talking about generics. I won't touch much on that. Dr. Jayalal has touched on it, although I would have just 2-3 quick bullet points for the entire community to think about. And when I say the community, I'm not just talking about doctors and pharma people. I'm talking about citizens at large. After all, there must be something which the government is thinking. Why, I wouldn't go ahead and just criticize them. The one thing that they're looking at is cutting down costs of healthcare in India. If we have to become one of the biggest economies of the world, I think that's a genuine concern. Collating that with generics, if you look at the guidelines presently in abeyance, we have said you can only, the word only is used. We have a lawyer on panel, which you can only prescribe generic drugs. Now, my question is, if you can only prescribe generic drugs, who will prescribe branded? No one, because only modern system of medicine doctors can prescribe modern allopathic medicines. So if no one can prescribe branded drugs, why should we have branded drugs in the market at all? Now, that's something, there's an overlapping. There is something which is under the purview of the drug controller and the Drug and Cosmetic Act. And there are certain things which the NMC is talking about. I would rather go a step ahead and say, I think Dr. Jayalal also touched on that, let there be a price brand on all non-patented medicines. It's only patented medicines which are beyond the purview of the authorities, of the regulatory authorities, vis-a-vis price band. So let's have a price brand and let everything be available on generic. Now, this may sound to be a different viewpoint from IMA, but it's not. I am as much IMA as Dr. Jayalal and all of us are. But we also talked about quality. We talked about quality assurance. Dr. Jayalal said only 2% of the medicines which are in the market undergo a quality test. I'm not certain if where we get this figure from, but is the responsibility of quality control of the profession? No, it's of the government. Is the government in pharmacological manufacturing? There used to be a company called IDPL, long wound up, and after that, the entire onus is on the private sector pharma. You cannot just look at private sector pharma as someone who's a cheat or who's trying to loot you. You have to be rational. So if you're talking of generic medicines only, my take on that is, sure enough, let me as a doctor have a right to prescribe generic with a name of a company within brackets, not even a name of a brand, and simultaneously ensure that all generics are within a fixed price brand. Now, this may not sound very good to people in the industry, but if we have to bring down cost of medicine, let's be upfront. I know of medicines, I don't want to name them, which the MRP is 20,000 rupees for an anti-oncology drug. The hospital buys it for 1,800 rupees and bills the patient for 20,000 plus 20% margin allowed. This is wrong. I think unless we introspect and be honest and bold about what's happening, we will have to do corrections. That's my first take on generics. I think Dr. Jayalal has covered most of the other things. I am with him on that. Now, there's an issue which no one is talking about, and that's my concern. And we have a lawyer on board. The NMC talks about professional misconduct. The draft guidelines brought out in 2022 also use the word medical negligence as part of professional misconduct. We had represented, I was chairman of a particular committee set up by Delhi State Medical Association, and we had said that, let's be very clear, professional misconduct and medical negligence are two absolutely different things. Is the NMC going to consider cases of professional misconduct or also professional negligence? Then professional negligence is bifurcated now into criminal and civil negligence. We know that 90% plus of complaints received by state medical councils and National Medical Council pertain to alleged professional or medical negligence, not misconduct. Misconduct is an absolutely different thing. It's a violation of one of the codes of ethics. Now, I am also, one of my companies is also advisor to a number of healthcare institutions on healthcare risk management. So I know this issue in depth. If a patient has a grievance against you, he can simultaneously go to the medical council, the civil court, the criminal court, the police, and the consumer court. So for one alleged negligence or offense, you are subjected to 5 simultaneous trials. I would recall Jacob Matthews' judgment of 1990 delivered by the then Chief Justice, Justice Lahoti, which is applicable even today, where they asked for defining procedure for prosecution of a doctor. Justice Lahoti's judgment very categorically said that the medical council, the government of India, and the state medical councils should formulate a procedure for prosecution of a doctor. We have all heard of the extreme unfortunate incident of a doctor colleague in Dosa, Rajasthan, booked under Section 302. Murder, not permissible. There is a Bolam's law. There are Harrison laws which are prevailing even today after Justice Lahoti's and subsequent Markandeya Karju's judgment. Why has the NMC, or for that matter, the government of India, not acted on what Justice Lahoti said in Jacob Matthews' case, formulate a procedure for prosecution of a doctor? If NMC was coming out with new guidelines, this should have been a mandatory part of the guideline. Any guideline for any profession needs to also protect the rights of the profession. You are only defining my duties and responsibilities, not my rights. There is also, in the Jacob Matthews case delivered by Chief Justice Lahoti, it laid down guidelines for prosecution, and it said that these will remain the guidelines for prosecution till the center, the NMC, and the state councils develop guidelines. So which means those guidelines are effective even today. Has the NMC in its guidelines even attempted to differentiate between professional misconduct, medical negligence, error of judgment, and medical accident? All the four are absolutely different things and need to be defined. I think more important, we would sort out issues of generic medicines. I'm sure we would sort out issues of CPD. I'll touch on that briefly. But I think most important, today, every doctor is apprehensive, views every patient as a potential litigant. We hear of incidents of violence against doctors, of hospitals and nursing homes being burned, and of policemen booking you under 304A and even 302 in the Rajasthan case without following the diktats and the guidelines laid by the Honorable Supreme Court. I think that should be a demand by each one of us, that the NMC guidelines should lay down a procedure for prosecution of doctors. Touching briefly on CPD, I would personally feel it's a welcome step, very loosely framed though. You have talked about different levels of punishments. You have talked about list A, list B, list O, and prohibited drugs. So you have said, I can prescribe list O on a telemedicine consult. I can prescribe list B on a video consult, not on an audio consult, and so on. So which means every doctor will need to be updated and briefed. I don't know how many of us, even those of us in active working and studying of laws, even knows what are the drugs in list A, list B, list O. You know, these are not comprehensive lists. Even if you look at the government sites, these are not comprehensive lists. There are confusions, which I think, without criticizing any organization, there was a proposal, if all of you remember, in the guideline which said the terminology doctor would be replaced with med doctor. Now, there were people for it and against it. I am one of those who support this, because this is one thing which would have differentiated qualified allopathic doctors from all others, including quacks. This provision has been dropped in the gazetted guidelines now in abeyance. Why? There are confusions like for what period you have to maintain medical records. If you read telemedicine guidelines, you have to maintain records for 3 years. If you read prescribing guidelines, you have to maintain record for 3 years only for inpatients. So what happens for an in-person consult, OPD consult? Do I have to maintain? Do I don't have to maintain? These are some detailed things which I think all of us would need to go in. CPD programs, Pharma should not sponsor. I'm aware of the last 2 weeks, 10 days of so many conferences which have got cancelled. Who will pay for my continuing medical education? Government has mandated I need to complete 30 hours, fair and square. Who pays for this? Medical organizations which do not come under the ambit of NMC, and that's a strong point which IMA has made, was also true for all other medical societies. Are they also barred from taking maybe what we could call educational grants for conducting CPD programs? If not, should the government develop an inbuilt system of delivering CPD? You have made it mandatory that I need to complete CPD. Who will organize it? You have given a list of people who would do it. Who would fund it? Are we going to tax? Are the doctors going to pay for themselves? I am against freebies. I strongly oppose doctors being bribed, if I could use that word. But yes, logics and rationals cannot be a background or a forum for our taking decisions. You cannot measure everyone with the same yardstick. What happens to hospitals? We are aware that corporate hospitals, the healthcare cost is going up, and that's a concern for the government, and I think a fair concern. Each one of us, in addition to being a doctor or a pharma professional, at some point of time is also a patient. And we know when we go to corporate hospitals, we know about the bills that we get. if you analyze, there was, I think, a study done by IMA which said, if you analyze corporate hospital bills, less than 5% of the total bill is doctor's fees. And it is only the doctor who's criticized. Doctors have become very expensive. How do we bring down those costs? I spoke to maybe a not on agenda thing, but I'll just quote, I spoke to a member of a pharmacy committee of a corporate hospital, and he said, if every patient bill can have one column which just mentions purchase price of the drug, in addition to the price billed, 90% of the problem will be solved. And when we talk of drug, we talk of medical devices. We know about the amount of commissions which get paid and the under-table deals. I think it's time for us to be bold as an organization, as a profession, as an industry, to take strong stands against what's wrong. And it's only then that I presume we can expect NMC to genuinely listen to us. You can't just criticize them and say everything what they're saying is wrong. We have to be concerned about the government's concern of bringing down cost of healthcare in India. That's my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Malik. I think your ending statement was very valid, that we cannot just go and criticize. We, as external stakeholders and all the stakeholders concerned involved, we need to probably go and pitch with respect to the aligning with the NMC's objective and the government's objective, that they want to bring the cost of medicines, cost of healthcare down for the benefit of the patients. So at the core of everything is the patient's interest, and that can only be achieved if all stakeholders work in tandem with each other, not fighting, but in tandem with each other, in coalition, in collaboration with each other. So when we talk of all stakeholders, with respect to it's incomplete. This aligning with the discussion is incomplete without the pharma stakeholder, because pharma is definitely in the thick and thin. And I would not say only pharma, all the healthcare industries, allied industries are thick and thin. They are affected, very deeply affected. Even there are a lot of ethics guideline practices which pharma also does, and they believe in that. But of course, there are things which happen beyond their control also. So we have with us Mr. Sujesh Vasudevan. He's senior advisor. He's currently the senior advisor of BCG, Boston Consulting Group. Before that, he was the Glenmark's president in India, formulations, and the Middle East and Africa. He also has a very much global exposure, worked for Middle East and Africa, and of course, very deep into Indian market, Indian pharma. And prior to joining Glenmark, he served as a director of sales and marketing at Abbott. So he's worked with a global company, Indian market, global market. So over to my colleague, Mr. Atul Sharma ji. Sir, you can start with the welcome, Sujesh, and over to Atul ji to start the discussion with Sujesh.
So first of all, I think there was a fabulous articulation from, say, legal perspective and from Dr. Jailal. So I think it has been very, very nicely articulated in terms of what are the regulation coming up and what kind of like nature or reflection it has in terms of its tone versus reality and then expectation. Now, I'll request Mr. Sujesh Vasudevan from two perspectives that as an industry expert or industry veteran, there are two pieces. How do you see the generic or branded generic in India, like it is about pricing or quality? So if it becomes generic only, does it give or assurance to, say, the patients or other stakeholders that quality will not get compromised? It will be only benefited to the patient and other HCPs in terms of affordability, followed by what is the perception of industry in terms of physician-patient relationship and its contribution. We are talking about like CME credits. So what will be the role, how it is being perceived? Is it only related to doctors' education, or does industry do a lot of things in terms of patient overall treatment journey, right from like creating awareness and addressing various other critical issues, could be diagnosis or fulfillment or addressing like adherence, or overall like creating the social awareness around patients. So what is the overall like role of industry in and around doctors to have the values or services to improve the patient care? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Atul, and thanks, Swadeep, for inviting me for this discussion, and thanks to you and the Foundation for organizing this. At the outset, let me just clarify that I am here in my individual capacity as someone who spent more than 3 decades in the industry. I do not represent any company or organization, and I just thought I would put that out as a disclaimer. Coming to your question, Atul, so when we talk about branded versus generic, and it's an important question to address, and I want to give you some context of what do these terms mean, and what are the different kinds of products available in the Indian market. So when we talk about branded, the concept really triggers from the innovator product. So if you look at the US, for example, there is an innovator who researches the molecule and then is given patent protection for a period of usually about 20 years, during which time the only brand available in that market, specifically if I look at the US, will be the innovator's brand, and which is the time when generally the prices tend to be very high for the branded product, and there is no other alternative of the same molecule available in the market. Now, after a period of 20 years, when the brand or the molecule goes off patent, it gives an opportunity for anyone else to introduce an equivalent of that brand in the market, which is called a generic product. Now, the US mandates that when a generic is available, then patients can have access to that generic. That means if prior to the introduction of the generic, if I was taking a branded version, which was more expensive, and today I have an option of switching from the brand to a generic, that is allowed in the US. And patients and doctors do not hesitate to make that switch, not just because the generic is cheaper than the branded, but also because it is equivalent to the brand. So any company which introduces a molecule in a generic version in the US will have to match their product and establish equivalence to the innovator. And equivalence, there are 2 kinds of equivalences. Just to put it in perspective, there is something called chemical equivalence, and there is a bio-equivalence. Chemical equivalence is if a molecule, 100 milligrams of a molecule is supposed to be present in a particular tablet. Then you can, establish that your tablet also has 100 milligrams and the innovator also has 100 milligrams. But that is not enough for a drug to exhibit its efficacy. That only, giving 100 milligrams may not be enough. It has to achieve certain levels in the body, because of which it will be able to demonstrate its efficacy. So the generic person, when they introduce, has to do a bioequivalence study against the innovator and establish that my drug is equivalent to the innovator, not just chemical equivalent, but also bio. And because of this comfort, which is given by generic manufacturers, because of this comfort, doctors and patients have got no hesitation to switch from a branded innovator product to a generic product. The second part of it is that all generics of a particular molecule will have to go through this process. So if you look at a molecule like atorvastatin, before it went off patent, it was, say, Pfizer's molecule. And after it went off patent, there would be many people, who would have introduced the generics. Now, all generics would have to go through the process of establishing equivalence.
But it will be acute symptoms. A patient has a history of 2 months abdominal pain.
Dr. Jailal, can you mute? Dr. Jailal, can you mute?
No issue in vomiting or fever.
Dr. Jailal, can you mute? Dr. Jailal, can you mute, sir? Your voice was coming in between. Can you mute? Can you put yourself on mute, sir? Yeah, thank you.
It's on mute.
Yeah.
So all the generics will have to go through this process, and therefore, there is comfort in prescribing. Now, when you come to India, let us look at the scenario that exists in India. So in India, you have, you may or may not have the innovator molecule in its branded version available in India, because innovator companies either may not be operating, or all Indian innovator companies may not be operating in India, or some of them may be operating but may choose not to introduce their molecule or their branded version in India. So either you have the innovator present, then you have, because historically, if you look at why did branded generics come into the market here, is because many companies, innovator companies from the West largely, and even from places like Japan, etc., were either not operating in India or did not introduce their products in India, and it was left to the Indian industry to develop the products, develop the API, develop the formulation, and make products available to Indian patients, and give the opportunity to doctors to use those products and give it to the Indian patients for their health benefits. So the Indian industry therefore has played a significant role as far as making quality products available to Indian patients at very, very economical prices. Those products were promoted to doctors, and today, by today's definition, they are called branded generics. So you have innovator products which may or may not be available in India. You have branded generics. In India, there are a couple of more kinds of generics available. There is something which is a relatively new phenomena, which is called trade generics. Now, trade generics are products available in the market which have a brand name, but are not promoted to doctors. So they are largely, distributed through the trade channel, which means through stockists and chemists, and are made available to the patients. But they are not promoted to doctors. And then there is the fourth one, which is generic, which is products which have got molecule name, but which do not have a brand. So these are the four kinds of, generics that are available. Now, so when we talk about branded versus generic, in India, it becomes a very different situation compared to what is there in the US. In the US, it's very clear. There is a branded innovator product, and then rest are all generics. Whereas in India, this is the situation. So you have, typically innovator, branded generic, trade generic, and generic generic. So four different things. Now, when there is a, push to make the doctor write generic, okay, this is where the questions start, that what is generic in India? So tomorrow, if a doctor writes only the molecule name and the patient goes with that prescription to a chemist, what does that patient get? Does he get a branded generic, which is a brand promoted to doctors? Does he get a trade generic, or does he get a generic generic? Now, just going by market statistics, at least in my view, and maybe somebody can ratify this also, but pure generics, that is without brand name molecules, the market is about 1 to 2% of the total market. India is, I think, about a 200,000 crore market, and 1 to 2% is only molecule generics. Trade generics are anywhere, these are not very published data, so it could be anywhere between 7 to 10 or 7 to 15% of the overall market. And rest of the things is either innovator products or branded generics. So which of these is, does the patient get? Now, there is also a feeling that writing generics ensures low prices to the patient. Okay, but, if you go by any kind of studies, or if you go to any chemist shop, you will find that a lot of times trade generics, which are, available at the chemist counters, and which chemists normally use it to substitute, other products because they get higher margins on trade generics. In many situations, the trade generics are equally priced to branded generics. Okay, now even within branded generics, you may have products available at different price points. So you could have the same brand, you could have a molecule available from one company which is giving branded generic at X price, and they could have someone else giving it 1.5x and someone else giving it 0.5x. So just because we are using the terminology generic doesn't guarantee that there is a price advantage available to the patient. And ultimately, all these regulations that we are talking about of NMC guidelines and all that doesn't necessarily, the objective of this is very noble, right? And I, anybody, whether it is from the doctor community or whether it is from, a patient body or whether it is from the pharma industry, will not be against the objective that we must make quality medications available to a large part of our population at a low price. I mean, there is no debate or dispute about it, right? But then, are we able to achieve this through the regulation? And like I said, in the US, you have bioequivalence, right? In India, there is no guarantee of bioequivalence because the law mandates that any molecule which is introduced in the country for the first time has to do a bioequivalence against the innovator. Subsequent introductions, as long as the product is new, that means a product in India is deemed to be new or a molecule is deemed to be new when it is in the first 4 years of its life. So any subsequent new product introduction within 4 years has to establish bioequivalence against the reference product. The reference product could be the innovator or the reference product could be as defined by the authorities, right? So that means molecules or brands that have been introduced in the first 4 years will be bioequivalent. After 4 years, the law doesn't mandate that you have to establish bioequivalence either against the innovator or against any other reference product, which means I can, after 4 years, introduce a product which is chemically equivalent. It may or may not be bioequivalent. So I'm not saying that anything introduced after 4 years is not bioequivalent, but it is not established, or it may not be established. Now, some companies may still choose to do a bioequivalence study and ensure that whatever products they're giving is equivalent, but everybody may not do that. So so how do we give assurance to the doctor that whether even if they write generic, what the patient gets is a bioequivalent product? Because in today's context, that is not available, and I think that's where the anxiety of doctors is also coming through. That when you're otherwise, and I don't think doctors will have any hesitation to write a generic if the end product which the patient gets is of a quality which they feel will do justice to their prescription and to the patient. Right. So I think this is where the whole issue lies, that there is no standardization of quality which exists in many of the Western markets where they establish this kind of equivalence. And I think if you're able to address that and then come to this whole issue about whether brand is important or generic is important, but in the absence of this thing, what has evolved over time is that companies have gained reputation that their product works, and which is where the role of brand comes into play. That because of my experience as a doctor with a particular brand, and I'm happy with the outcomes that my patients got after I prescribed that particular brand, that gives confidence and trust, and that's why doctors prefer to use brands versus, transferring that decision to someone else where they're not very confident of what will happen to the patient. Now, you take a situation where a patient is taking an antihypertensive product, right? Now, today, if I go to a chemist counter, and suppose if a doctor has written generic, and I go to a chemist counter in Mumbai city, and I get a generic made by XYZ company. Now, for some reason, I go to Delhi on work, and I run short of that antihypertensive medication, and I go to the chemist in Delhi. Am I assured that I will get the same company's generic in Delhi, or whether I will get another company's generic in Delhi? And will that company's generic be the same as generic be the same in terms of quality and bioequivalence to the product which I was already consuming in Bombay? Now, these are again questions which are, which honestly, in my, understanding, these I don't have any clear-cut answers. And I think while framing policy guidelines, etc., I think some of these should also be taken into account. That how do we ensure that patients living in any corner of the country, when they're taking a molecule, they get what they are supposed to, and there is no doubt in anybody's mind, whether the patient's mind or doctor's mind, that there is something which could be amiss, when they're consumed. So I think that kind of framework and infrastructure, if it is created, it will help people to be more confident about some of these choices. Now, coming to your
just for the benefit of doctors and patient, can we articulate Say in US we have innovator product, and the moment patent expires, it is substituted, or an additional option which is given is generic product.
Yeah.
The generic product available as a substitute to innovator product comes from a facility which has to be US FDA approved.
Yes.
And there is no compromise on that. So there is a 0% compromise, which means the product has to be chemically equivalent and bioequivalent. So in say, there is a confidence and there is a regulation, there is a process that you have something like which is very, very less expensive, but it is generic, but quality is at par with the innovator. Now in India, when we are talking about generic, branded generic, do we have that kind of like generic quality available in India, even from the branded generics?
Yeah.
Are the products available in India, pan-India, from any company, XYZ? Do we have access to product, whether it is hypertensive, diabetes or anything, coming from the US FDA approved facility and it is a global standard? Or we are still having, say, WHO GMP, which could be, say, not as good as US FDA, or maybe other, say, just GMP, not WHO GMP. And then we are taking up a reverse gear, getting into generic, where there is no quality control. So your take on that.
Yeah. So as far as this, see, I'm not an expert on manufacturing, okay, but my understanding, being with the industry, is that there is something called Schedule M, which prescribes what kind of manufacturing facilities a company should comply with, right? And then there is this thing about WHO GMP qualification, and then there is other regulatory bodies globally. You could have MHRA from UK, or you could have US FDA from the United States, or those regulatory bodies who have their own standards. In India, generally, while there are, we are supposed to have the second largest number of US FDA plants, but majority of these US FDA approved plants supply medications to the United States. It is almost exclusively for their requirements. And in India, even if a company were to have a US FDA plant, they may have a separate plant usually for domestic supplies. As long as the manufacturing facility is on par with minimum standards, and those are adhered to. I think the question is not just about US FDA, but about adherence to. And if you look at the kind of vigilance that US FDA has in plants operating out of India, that is something which makes, I think, the difference. It's not just about creating a framework of quality, but also to ensure that that framework is being adhered to, and that requires a lot of inspection, monitoring, etc., which US FDA does. In fact, they have got a big team which operates out of India, considering the fact that India is one of the largest suppliers of generic medications to the US. Now, in India, there is like I said, there is a standard. I think there was a recent I don't know, a requirement laid out that any company which has got a turnover of about 250 crores has to mandatorily comply with, the guide, minimum manufacturing expectations. And anybody who's got a turnover of less than 250 crores has to do it within 1 year. So the fact that this kind of a requirement has been laid out specifically also probably partly answers the question that maybe there are manufacturers who are not adhering to these guidelines, and that's the reason why there was a request made out to again reinforce something like this, that adherence to the manufacturing guidelines.
Atul sir, by your permission, may I interfere? So I think we were extending a bit on time, so we'll get back to any pertinent question with Sujesh. But Sujesh, one of the most valid point which I understood was that the trust on the brands compared to the trust on the generics, and it applies not only to medicines, but it applies to all the categories and all other items, which particularly the retail items that are available, whether it is the food or consumer goods or anything. The brand always has a trust because brand has their ownership, and that pertinently applies to the medicines also. That's definitely.
I'll just add one statement here for the benefit, because this is an issue which is to be talked about. India has over more than 100 US FDA approved facility, which is one of the largest in the world, with the largest capacity to maybe address 50% of the global requirement for quality drugs. Any one of these companies cannot sell their product even as generic in India, because compared to Indian branded generic, that generic version which is coming from US FDA supply chain would cost at least 5 times more. So my take here is that the India need to move towards global standards and not compromise on quality as far as the human healthcare is concerned, rather than looking for low-cost generic one. That's like I'm putting it up. Over to Swadeep. Yeah,
very good point. So when our last panelist, Mr. Brajesh Singh, is president of Arthur D. Little. He's got more than 30 years of rich experience in varied roles. And what I've seen him very actively working, and that was my interest on bringing him on board with Nat Health and a lot of other healthcare organizations, mainly the hospitals and the medical devices industry. So we had a very good perspective on pharma and the medical community. And Brajesh, would quickly like to touch on the other industries in terms of their view. Like you have got the hospitals is again a very large stakeholder, and you have got medical devices and a lot of healthcare startups also evolving, who are quite closely associated with the medical community, and they work very closely with the medical community.
Right. Thanks, Sudeep. I think without wasting time, let me come to the point. I think, see, this NMC guidelines, unfortunately, I think if I may put rightly, they are immature and improper in the current frame. Okay. In the situation where 57% of the district in this country don't have the medical colleges, in the situation when our doctor-patient ratio is way too low than what World Health Organization has prescribed, we are actually putting some conditions on a doctor where this entire industry or this entire profession is coming under the question. I think, see, government has a bigger 3 objectives, if I may put. They are looking at access of healthcare, which is affordable to the people. And also, I think the conscious effort is to bring transparency. But the point here is, I think Dr. Jailal has, briefly mentioned about it, that NMC as a body itself, missing that transparency. So who are the people, determining about the fate of doctor, their conduct in the market? Certainly, there's a need. You have to have a code of conduct. You have to have regulations. But I think the participation of the healthcare professional from varied association is also very essential. What I could see is nothing but like a repetition of Pharma bill kind of situation here. You're bringing something forward where a lot of people have not been put into the consideration, and this is where I think you have received a lot of backlash. Maybe you are forced to put things under abeyance and recontemplating whether what is right. And as Krishna ji mentioned about, it is less thought. You're talking about CPD in this market. Do we have infrastructure available? Do we have seats available? We are running out of the entire fraternity. There is no doctor available. There's no nurses available, and you are putting draconian laws on these people. I think hospitals are also taken aback. I'll tell you, because this leaves a very cascading effect. If you are putting doctors under so many scanners, they are going to have tremendous pressure on performance also. And then coming to the next point, I think when you're talking to mitigate corruption, people find their ways. If you are allowing some people not to, what is that? You cannot promote your services digitally. We are talking about Digital India. We're talking about Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. You have platforms where patients do search about it. Who's the good doctor? For example, gynae, for example, oncology, all this specialty, when somebody really look forward to consult a doctor, they look at the feedback. They look at who has been doing good. Now you're encouraging that, you cannot put your credentials on social media. You cannot talk about goodness of your professionalism. I think that's like jeopardizing a doctor's availability to sell their skill in the market. Sujesh has rightly mentioned about, generic medicine, and what Atulji was talking makes sense. You are copying something from Western world, the infrastructure there, the understanding, the readiness for the overall intellect in this entire fraternity is different than what you're talking about. I mean, if this continues by, this kind of practices of pulling things the way they have come up with these guidelines, most of the doctors will find ways, finding opportunity of working in different market than serving the Indian client. So I think my suggestion or my 2 cents about this entire NMC would be maybe government has a very bigger objective to go to the market in 2024. And they have a bigger objective of, talking to people about healthcare services, affordable healthcare in the market. By putting doctor under scanner and, giving the baton to the pharmaceutical, what are you doing? If a doctor writes a medicine, without any brand, as Sujesh mentioned, there's no, guarantee. And he's putting under the ownership because he is going to take the owner. So you're making him accountable without giving him an authority to determine the drug that he's going to prescribe. And it is a pharmacist who is going to determine as to what product has to be sold. In fact, indirectly, you are encouraging another lobby, which is going to be more dominating. These are 2 cents from my side. And I think, other industries, which are like ancillary industry, certainly, I think some folks in pharma may be very happy. But I think if everybody, all the players in the entire healthcare fraternity, be it the provider, be it the, the medtech, everyone, I think if they do not talk in unison, this is going to be a problem for always.
Thank you. Very valid points, Rajesh. So I will, also thanks to our partner, Life Pharma Coalition, we have Mr. Yashwant Mishra, who's the founder of Life Pharma Coalition. He has got a network of more than 1,000 pharma professionals. That's why today we have got a participation through Life Pharma Coalition network and through network of Building Big Brands run by Mr. Atul Sharma. We have a participation of more than 1,000 participants, combined YouTube and Zoom link, which is a big number because of the importance of the topic and the clarity which everybody wants. So very, very quickly, I'll go with one round of questions. I'll go to Krishna ji, and then I'll go to the first in sequence with Dr. Jailal. Dr. Jailal, you're there, sir? Dr. Jailal, you're there, sir?
Yeah.
Dr. Jailal, can you unmute, sir? So I'll start with Dr. Jailal, then Krishna ji, and then Dr. Malik, and then Mr. Atul Sharma will take on with the last bit of question with Sujesh and Rajesh. And then we have few questions punched in by our viewers that also will take 2-3 important questions which remain unanswered. So Dr. Jailal, you have heard the whole discussion, and so what do you think is, you and IMA and all the medical community have been very proactive and actively pursuing, and I would say actively fighting this whole thing. So what is the way forward? What do you think, where it's going to take us and where it's going to end, or anything positive you think in the light of your interaction with the health minister, the NMC officials and everybody concerned?
Yeah, we positively believe lobbying is the best method, because all the minds put together, because all of our intention is our patients should get a better healthcare, affordable and accessible healthcare. And that is a motto of anybody, even the government of India. Everybody thinks that people should get benefit. Even the doctors are also thinking in the same line. Only thing that how to reach that is a question. Now, at least the platform is being created. The time of discussion has started. A lot of times the government has now started discussion with all the stakeholders. So this is a right step. I'm sure and I'm confident a right solution will be coming, where we will be able to ensure the quality of the drug, where which we will come to the stage that it may not be in 1 year or in 10 years. Definitely we will go towards a level where the quality assured generic prescription will be mandatorily come. The second part, the government should also understand, and we also, the whole medical fraternity accept, individual, any benefit to the doctors for attending CPD should be stopped. No doctor, we are talking about no doctor should get any freebies from any company. But on the other hand, to provide them CPD, association and organization, whether it's a professional organization or organization, should be allowed to get the educational grant to conduct the CPD, so that the benefit of that, when a doctor is empowered with the knowledge, it is not the doctor is going to get benefit. The benefit is going to be the public. Benefit is going to be the community. In view of a social responsibility scale, all the association organization getting the educational grant should be allowed. I think the government will definitely consider it. If it is the government is on the view that it should not be done, let them constitute a separate body. Let them have separate funds for organizing CPD programs, organizing CME programs. Let them sponsor the government. Let it sponsor the programs, and we are also open to that. But without that, it will not be possible for CPD. That will result in the society is not getting the advancements in the healthcare development. So these are the two major issues which we are fighting for. I think we are hoping positively, and the future is bright, and we will be able to ensure affordable and accessible healthcare to our countries.
So very important point made by Dr. Jailal, that if government doesn't agree, they should constitute a separate body for CPD and CMEs and also take responsibility of funding it, because somebody has to take, that was the point made by Dr. Malik also, somebody has to take the responsibility of funding these CMEs and conferences, otherwise they'll stop happening. And this is a global norm. Globally, it has been happening in the way that industry is responsibility to support and fund such programs. And of course, within ethical limits, that should be the better role of the government to monitor the ethical limits rather than putting draconian regulations of forcing them to stop this whole activities. Very, very point. Coming to Krishnaji, your talk was very, very informative. But yes, when the day this whole thing came into abeyance, the guideline came into abeyance, and it was not withdrawn, it is into abeyance. So what is the legal status currently? Would definitely like to hear from Krishnaji, and particularly, and what do you think, how much, of course, there's not a clear-cut answer of when it should be notified, but how it will be notified. Like, it's very important to know that will there be a sort of a consultation, public notification, circulation and consultation happening before the second version of guidelines come up? And ideally, if you can also recommend, ideally, how it should come out balanced. It should not be very pro, what are the key issues? It should not be very pro industry. It should definitely not be only for the interest of the industry. The core of everything should be the interest of the patients and their benefits. And of course, the doctor in between, जो doctor बीच में पिस जाता है, उसके लिए क्या बढ़िया होगा, which is covered in this guideline in a more balanced way. Krishna ji, can you unmute?
Okay, sorry. So let me answer this by looking at the best practices elsewhere. This issue is not particular to India. The other countries have tackled the same issue, in very different ways. So, in the case of India, this the recent regulations took the place of the MCI guidelines, okay, and it is directed to RMPs. Let's look at the US. The US has a guideline called, it's a law actually, the Sunshine Act, which is, focused on the industry. The industry has to disclose, okay? All there, wherever there is a transfer of value, they have to kind of, disclose it. What we saw in Europe is, except for France and Portugal, which has a law, mandated by the state, other countries like Germany, UK, Italy, all the other larger economies, they allow for the industry association. It's called the FPR, European Federation of, the Industry Association. Their regulation, it's a self-regulated markets. So it's, different countries have tackled different. In Netherlands, it is a third party that has made the regulations, both for medical devices and as well as for pharmaceuticals. So I feel that in India, it is not as if this space is, left totally, empty. There was the MCI guidelines addressed to the RMPs. There was a UCPMP that has not been made mandatory. It's voluntary, but it has very stringent requirement of oversight in terms of what the association must have, what should be kind of put out in the website, what should be submitted every 3 months to the to the Department of Pharmaceuticals. Also, there are two other, developments. One is that there is a high-level, committee in the government, which is headed by the DOP secretary and the Niti Aayog. I think Dr. V.K. Paul is a chair, which is looking at trying to get all these different regulations under one umbrella and see what are the kind of things that's required, because there is also an income tax angle to this. There is a case pending in the Supreme Court. The next date of hearing is, I think, September 6th, the FMRI case. Okay. So I think that too much of regulation is not what you're looking at. You're looking at a regulation, which I would feel is a self-regulation, the best way to go forward, and with some sort of oversight by the government. The NMC regulations is way too, kind of draconian.
So just one more clarity in terms of the re-notification process. So will it mandatory go for a consultation, open consultation, or they can re-notify, changing it on their own and publish the notification?
In 2022 also, there was a, for the sake of it, a stakeholder consultation, but none of the stakeholder consultation was actually taken on board when this was issued. So they are not mandated to do that. Usually for transparency, it is required that there is stakeholders, meaningful stakeholder consultation. ऐसे करके there's no फायदा ना, just for doing it for the sake of a tick box. So in terms of like whether they need to do that or not, there is no mandatoriness, but I hope there's direction from the government that NMC please kind of, do this. Or for, just scrap it. There should be some sort of like, this high level committee should take a call as to what should kind of be the rule, because this regulation is trying to do a lot of things other than kind of the, code of conduct alone for our MPs.
Got it. So the minister has done some stakeholder consultation. What you advise that NMC should properly do the process of
the stakeholder consultation was like more of emergency. Emergency risk came, so something has to be done, and it's a good thing. We are very grateful that he addressed it.
Okay, got it, Krishna. Thank you. Over to Dr. Sanjeev Malik. Dr. Malik, I think I'll have two questions. Since you have seen the industry side, being at the helm of IMA, done so many, being a part of so many huge conferences. So when it comes to CPD, what do you think is the real? So one is the CPD. Second is even the whole clause of the advisors, that the educators, the key opinion leaders who come on board as a faculty or as a session expert, as a speaker in conferences. So they're also being like the twist. There's a big change in the regulations regarding their payment or their fees paid by the pharma company. So what is your view on that, Dr. Malik? So if you can unmute. Dr. Malik, if you can unmute. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Sudeep, two things. One is I'll take liberty of saying something which is not part of your question. That is that when I listen to everyone, you see, broadly, I would feel more or less everyone is on the same page that we've actually put the cart before the bullock. We need to do more to regulate quality of drugs, and that is beyond the purview of doctors. I think what Sujesh very rightly said, talks about bioequivalence and mandatory bioequivalence being over after 4 years. Now, we as doctors don't understand that, So I think the government, we only talk of US FDA and WHO GMP. Why can't it be that DCGI and its role and the Drug and Cosmetic Act of India get quoted all over the world as one of the best? So I think government needs to do phenomenally more to improve quality of drugs, and then probably talk of generics or branded. That's one. Two, CPD. Very pertinent. When we had a meeting of core committee, which was formed to look at the proposed guidelines 2022, there were a lot of faculty members and senior directors and professors, even from government institutions, who were very concerned that while they spend a whole lot of their time and life in educating people, the way they get their CME credit hours is also the same as others. So if I'm a professor in a medical college, what I am teaching, what I am learning, what I am doing credit hours, so there has to be a look at that stakeholder group also. You have these bodies like the ACME, the Accreditation Council of CME, these guidelines have also said that they will build up a similar guideline. There are certain guidelines. Keep in mind, even this Gazette notification has certain guidelines which are missing. So there is one of the guidelines which they have proposed is your interaction with pharmaceuticals, which has still not been notified. So what do they have in mind as far as that is concerned? I think it should be a very clear-cut case that CMEs need to be accredited properly vis-a-vis their content. Any conflict of interest needs to be very clearly defined, and the pharma industry as an important stakeholder should be permitted to contribute educational grants for conducting this. Alternatively, like I said, the government will have to take the responsibility of funding CMEs. That's my take on that.
Got it, Dr. Malik. Many questions, but yes, we have this hard stop and we are running late. So I would request Atul sir to take one question each, sir, with Sujesh and Brajesh, and also then put on concluding remarks, because I think the questions which were punched in also are more widely answered today through various panelists.
So my first question goes to Sujesh that I see the industry and the medical fraternity a continuing education or training. As an outsider, I don't see there is a problem, because at the end of the day, collectively they are treating the patient and they are doing everything which is required to improve the patient outcomes or patient receives the quality of the treatment. Do you see from industry perspective the government should not put any kind of barrier in terms of facilitating education or upgradation or improvement of quality care around patients? Yeah.
So I think at the outset, why in my view why all this is happening, I feel, is because there is a lens with which all this is being viewed, not just about pharma doctor interactions, but even there is some kind of suspicion which might be triggered off by anecdotal cases here and there. But at least in my experience, for the last so many years, I haven't come across any doctor, and I've met a lot of doctors during these last 20, 30 years that I've been with the industry. I've not come across any doctor who has got anything but the interest of patients in mind. They will go to any extent to ensure that patients who are in their care recover and go home. So that's been the outlook of the doctor fraternity, and equally, that companies also put every effort to ensure that their products are of the best quality and are within reach of the patients. Now, having said that, it's not just about the pharma companies are manufacturing medicines. If you look at the amount of work that pharma companies have done in terms of propagating awareness of diseases, you look at the work on, say, thyroid management, which has been done by a particular company. They have brought thyroid issues to the forefront. You look at companies which have done humongous work in terms of looking at hypertension as a big crisis. Look at the amount of resources that companies are investing in trying to catch undiagnosed hypertensives and bringing them to the treatment pool. Look at the number of camps that diabetes companies do to capture patients who are otherwise walking around without knowing that they have got diabetes, by conducting camps, organizing diagnosis camps, subsidizing diagnostic tests, and so many things, so that you're getting patients into the pool. You look at the work that is being done in case of
Dr. Malik, can you mute, sir? Dr. Malik, can you mute, sir?
If you look at the work that is being done in so many other therapy areas, whether you look at in gynecology, in terms of hemoglobin, improvement programs that companies run. So it's not that it's all about a very commercial transaction that maine dawa bana diya and then becha and then I make profits, right? There is a lot of surrounding work which happens in terms of pushing awareness, diagnostics, ensuring compliance, patient education programs. Look at the work that is happening by companies which is
Dr. Malik, mute nahi hai aapka, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
companies doing work in the area of respiratory medicine, right? And in case of tuberculosis, so there are so many examples that are available where companies have gone beyond this whole, only manufacturing medicines and making it available to doing work which otherwise, I don't know who would do. So if today, health parameters have improved significantly, across the population, I'm sure that there is some role that has been played by the industry. Definitely, a significant role has been played by the medical fraternity and also the government. So it's not that people are working at cross purposes. I think everybody's got the best intention of patient care at their heart. And I think if all of them have the same objective, then it's a question of trusting each other. We are talking about trusting generics, but I think if you are able to trust each other, the government, the medical fraternity, and the pharma industry, and work together for that single objective of ensuring better access to quality medications at a affordable price, I think then I think we'll see much more joint effort towards what we achieve.
Thank you. Atulji.
So my next question, I first of all, I would like to acknowledge, I think it's a brilliant orientation. I can recall a couple of years back, 2 years back, there was a study done on non-communicable diseases and what kind of programs are operating to create a patient-physician and healthcare engagements and improving that outcomes. So this was a WHO initiated a study, and I say maybe 1/3 of the programs were sponsored or funded by the global agencies, and there were limited programs as a national program by the government of India, but almost half of the program were at a regional level or a pan-India level were initiated by the IPM or Indian pharma companies, which could be combination of both MNCs and Indian. Brijesh, how do you see, what is your perspective? So I'm not changing the question, but keeping this view, does industry play an important role, or it is only role in terms of providing only the lowest cost generic medicine, or they have a role in terms of playing or value creation around physician and patients or the community? Yeah.
So let me take it where Sujesh left. I think when an industry, maybe a pharma company or medtech, when they look at, I think this is part of their overall objective of doing business. I think I will not say it's more of a charity, but this is a complete process of doing business. You create a market, and by doing a lot of charitable stuff or by doing a little awareness initiative, I think you also create a market. But that's where the business is. Okay, as long as everybody has this common objective of providing the advantage to the person at the last mile of the society, everything is fine. Okay, ultimately we reach where we all are looking forward, including the government or an NMC. Everybody wants that the healthcare should be affordable. Everybody wants that there has to be transparency, and ultimately everybody wants that sarve bhavantu sukhina. That's what everybody is talking about. But I think we have to be careful about that. If you bring in those kind of situation where industry is pushed to the corner, I think this loses the bigger objective. One such initiative, one such guidelines, they push the entire fraternity a couple of years back. I think the kind of momentum this India was making for really going great on, creating Ayushman Bharat, I certainly feel this kind of initiatives are going to be more challenging, and I think like impediments. Second question, Atulji, you asked about, I think industry is not only doctor, okay? Doctor is part of the process, and I think he plays a vital role of connecting everything. If you are not going to have qualified doctors, motivated doctors who have, very common objective, no matter how great generic or so generic medicines you encourage, I think the bigger objective will not be accomplished. And if you don't have any of the value chain component player, whether this is like hospital or maybe the medtech player or anybody's entire component value chain is not happy with whatever government is trying to do, I think the objective will not be accomplished in the time it says. My take is very simple from this. I mean, let's come back to this conundrum that Swadeep and his team has come up with. I think, this is, again, I would say it's just ill thought or probably improperly thought, too immature to put at this point in time. I was looking forward the government to be more cohesive with the industry, with the doctor, coming up with a scheme on involving more doctors coming in, which I think these initiatives or this NMC guidelines have really caused a concern now. if somebody wants my advice, in policy making or maybe in a way forward, I would simply say, please involve the doctors, please involve the fraternity, and I think also understand their voice as to what kind of challenges are they going. I think in between we talked about the profitability, maybe the hospitals are making or corporate hospitals are making, but the reality in India is that 70% of the medical care is done by the private players. So the cost of running the operations, cost of doing the entire transaction is also going to be very high. If government is talking about affordability, it has to be on all the aspect in terms of taxes, in terms of giving the PLIs, in terms of encouraging Make in India and Make for the World initiatives. You said about US-based company who are getting the manufacturing done in India. Rightly, I think they're actually making for their US supply. They're not supplying in India. So what are we looking at? I think if you really want to match the global standard, you need to create your own bench strength. So whether government is focusing on the bench strength, I think is a question today. See, the job of government is very clear to me, Atulji. Government's job is to provide conducive environment for the player to work. You create the framework where doctor, where medical practitioner, or the pharma players or the hospitals are working comfortably, cohesively. So those are my takes, and I'm certain what Krishnaji is saying. I do not see that kind of transparency because unfortunately we have not seen in past. But I only hope that NMC sit back, call participation from IMA and other bodies who are working closely for the medical fraternity and consider their input while they really come up with the next guidelines.
Thank you very much, Brajesh. So in last 35 years, I just extending what you said. Ayushman Bharat is very, very recent. But what infrastructure, what contribution, how let's say access to healthcare is provided, has been a large contribution of not government, but actually it been the private player. And we need to salute the doctors and we need to salute the industry. They have done a fabulous job. Then with this, I will take a request Swadeep ji to take it to that conclusionary remark and then say vote of thanks to all the people.
Yeah. So thank you, Atulji. So first of all, let me thank all the panelists and also a request to them because it has been a excellent response, like including Zoom and YouTube, wherein we just gave a notice of 2 days or 3 days. We started work on it 3 days, 4 days back. And the communication circulation of this program was done only 2 days back. In last 2 days, we have reached out. So still we have touched almost 1,000 people, including YouTube and Zoom. A lot of people coming in and going out also in between, but that's a good number. It means that there is a need for this sort of education, so there is a conundrum and it needs to be clarified further. So my request to Krishnaji, to Sujesh, to Dr. Sanjeev Malik, to Brajesh, to Atulji, and to Dr. Jailal, and everybody on this panel, Dr. Malik, and our partners, Pharma, Life Pharma Coalition, that together we should continue with this series. Like, for example, one point which was raised by Brajesh, but we did not take it specifically because we already have almost 2 hours of discussion. Still we are discussing, and still because there are so many unanswered questions, and which Brajesh took up, and I think I'll ask that question before concluding with Dr. Malik also, is on one of the guidelines on the promotion, marketing, PR, marketing, promotion, visibility of the doctors. The doctors individually, how far they can promote themselves. So there's some NMC guideline also touched on that. We can take up in some other session. Tomorrow, definitely me and Dr. Malik are meeting at the DMA annual conference where Dr. Malik has conceptualized beyond medicine and connecting and talking on these issues like specifically related to medical community, doctors, which is taking up. So if you have any point on that, Dr. Malik, then we can conclude with the promise that we'll meet again and do a series on this. You have to unmute.
Yeah. Sudeep, I think, first of all, thank you for coordinating this. And this something is very useful. And what you said is all of us will have to constantly take this forward, do more in-depth studies. There are so many issues. I touched on the professional misconduct and negligence, and I am sure Krishnaji would agree that's still an area where there's a lot of concern to doctors who actually get looked into this. So we are, like Sudeep said, tomorrow we have this specially organized conference titled Beyond Medicine, where we're just discussing everything other than hardcore healthcare. So laws, Supreme Court judgments, accounting, taxation for doctors, incentives which should be given. And I think Sudeep and his foundation should take up the role of specific aspects, discuss them at length. There is a need in the country for people to understand. Not many of us even know what laws are applicable to me. Not many of us, we're talking of NMC. I know of that everyone is asking questions, but people have not read. So I need to know what is it that I need to follow, what is it that if I don't follow would become a cause for my prosecution or litigation and things like that. So I would suggest Sudeep, the HEAL Foundation, and all like-minded organizations to constantly organize things for this on these different topics for the larger interest of all of us and obviously for the country as a whole.
Yeah. So we would definitely, to Krishna ji, we definitely like technical support of organizations like the Corporate Law Group, who are one of the most experienced in IP, pharma, healthcare policies overall. And of course, we'll get on board some doctor-related policies experts also going forward. So Krishna ji, final remark, and then we'll conclude. 2-3 specific things you would like to change in this notification so that it becomes more balanced. If you unmute, yeah.
I already flagged it. I really thought, the two doctors in the panel today making those remarks that they do believe that it would be completely different. I am not very sure that, the system can be overturned so much fundamentally, that is the NMC itself. So you have to work within that for the short run to make sure that the 3 issues that I flagged, and I'll add, Dr. Malik's very valid, point that I did not look at it from that angle, that regulation should not only be about, determining duties, it should also be protective of the, who they say they represent. So that's important. I'll add that as the 4th column, Dr. Malik, in the next iteration of my presentation. Okay, I think, Swadeep, I would suggest that you don't kind of, let the focus go away, that this is something that is just in abeyance and it's not the last word.
Very right. Thank you. We still have a lot of unanswered questions, but we have to hard stop. We are already into 2 hours of discussion. Very fruitful, very useful discussion. Thank you again. Thank you all our media friends who attended. Thank you all the audiences who have attended from India and abroad. And thank you all our respected panelists and my co-moderators, Mr. Atul Sharma ji, and our partner, Mr. Yashant Mishra, and other colleagues. Thank you so much again. Thank you.